What does beauty mean to you? Hello and welcome to the first video in a series talking about personal growth and asking some different questions, probably using myself as an example multiple times to explain how I've grown and navigated through this crazy world that we live in. So today marks a video that I'm pretty proud of talking about, but at the same time, I'm a little nervous because there's a lot of examples I'm giving, like from my childhood, that are personal, and I just want to give a trigger warning disclaimer that this video talks about stuff that others could find like incredibly offensive, like body weight or physical appearance, using the words like fat and obese. If those are things that you don't want to hear, then like just click off the video, man. Like it won't hurt my feelings. I'm just in a camera. But this all kind of stems from me unpacking what's been going on for like 2 decades of my life, and I'm only 27, so it's been happening for basically my whole life. And I just recently redefined beauty and what it means to me, and I found a definition that I think can apply to anyone in any situation. And I think that that's really beautiful and worth sharing. So, a lot of what I'm unpacking here is my struggles with defining beauty in a healthy way and understanding how to think about myself and view myself positively from like a physical standpoint, because I was surrounded by a lot of messages that and ideals that weren't healthy, and it really warped my perception of myself in a way to where I didn't feel good about how I physically looked, just as a human being in this little skin suit here. And it's been really hard. So this video is a little bit longer because it's difficult to unpack like 20 years of my life in a very short amount of time and have it make sense and be meaningful, and done with the nuance needed to remind people that just because someone said it to me doesn't mean that I believe it, and I'm not promoting it here. I'm giving it as an example to explain the gravity of the situation and how my my experiences can shape the way that I thought about the world, and maybe that's relatable to other people. Maybe this is helpful for someone else to hear so that they know there are other people that have struggled with this, and maybe it can be therapeutic or inspiring or, just like kind of ease of mind that it's okay and you can get through it too. So for those of you who want to hear something like that and hear me discuss my version of the story, welcome. And I'm happy to have you. I'm glad. If this video helps even one person, that's more than enough for me, and I think that all the work that I put into this is totally worth it. So, just another disclaimer before I start, I put some links down below where other people with different lenses of viewing the world have discussed these topics, and I'm trusting these creators that in their videos, which I which I have viewed fully, I trust that they will give you good information that isn't going to be detrimental or bigoted in any way. I think that they're all well-meaning people that do a good job in these videos. The first link is somebody interviewing a therapist on their channel, and they talk about body dysmorphia and some ways that you can kind of work on that with yourself. The second video is a young woman talking about how the body positivity movement started and began, and how it had well intentions but kind of fell off and became a little more toxic, a little more questionable, and how she relates to that and chooses to move forward. And then the third video is a woman covering how the Biggest Loser TV show that was on like a while ago wasn't as well intentioned as it was marketed out to be. It was actually just fat shaming on national television. And she talks about the crash out and some of the negative impacts it's had on the people. And she wraps it up in a way to where she's affirming that, like, regardless of what you look like, you're beautiful anyway. So I think it's a nice message, even if it's kind of a little bit of a darker true crime-esque video. The fourth link is talking about how body dysmorphia can impact men and how it can present itself in men. And then the fifth video is a personal trainer who's talking about advice that he likes to give his clients, regardless of their fitness level, for when they feel self conscious about their own bodies due to social media and other influences. So I'm going to cut now to a previous version of me where I filmed this discussion when everything was a lot fresher, because I think that the emotions I conveyed there, being a lot more raw, helped convey how impactful these types of ideals can be on somebody's life. And if I rehearsed it again now, it would be more streamlined and maybe the discussion would be quicker, but it wouldn't feel as genuine. So I really hope you enjoy and this helps in your own life journey. So let's get into it.
I wanted to start by talking about what led me to even having the internal dialogue of what does beauty mean to me. And it started yesterday when I was walking the dogs. Because I actually have time to think, and dogs are really good about not imposing beliefs or values onto you. They're great. And so I was thinking to myself, why am I having issues losing weight? Because that's something that I've wanted to do. I used to be a lot more like muscly and toned, and now there's nothing, and like there's nothing wrong with this. I'm still beautiful the way that I am, but I personally enjoyed being able to flex as I did like 4 or 5 years ago when I was lifting weights. And so I was thinking to myself, why am I having problems staying motivated? Why is it that when I try a new exercise routine or I try a new diet, however small of a change, not all of them are radicalizations, I stop doing it and it doesn't take very long. And I also don't notice or pay mind to the fact that I've dropped off of a new diet or exercise routine until it's been a couple weeks. Like I haven't done it in a while. And I came to the conclusion that I obviously aren't like I don't care. I'm not putting a lot of value or worth into this because if I did care, it would take me a few weeks of not doing it to notice that I'm not doing it. Like if I'm not paying mind to it, then obviously it's not important. And so I thought to myself, well, if I want to do it, there's some amount of importance there. So how is it important enough for me to feel like I need to do this or I really want to do this? But there isn't enough importance for me to follow through. And I started thinking about, well, why do I want to lose weight? Why is the way that I am now not something I'm satisfied with? Why is it not good enough for me? Like, what am I not recognizing here? Where is the disconnect? And I started unpacking the ideas behind my motivations. So at first it was kind of the classical, I want to lose weight so that not necessarily to be more fit, um, but so that I can just feel better about myself. And that's, I think, a very damaging way to be. And it's something where now that I've had this discussion, because this is my thoughts in the past, like just yesterday morning even, of like, wow, like I don't feel good about myself if I don't have muscles and I can't flex. Well, like how not good about myself is it like I still value myself as a human being and I'm still worthy of love and I'm still like beautiful, but it would just be, icing on the cake of, hey, look, now I'm a little more beautiful. Like the difference between like wearing sweats every day and having like a ballroom gown when you go to some extravagant event and you feel great. Um, or is it something deeper? Is it deeper rooted? And so I started asking, like, why would I feel better about myself? And how much better about myself would I feel? And I started to put these pieces together that I didn't think of unpacking or admitting to myself for a long time, but I've been conditioned throughout my lifetime, and that's what we're going to explore, and that's where some really offensive topics come in, more offensive than this, that there are all of these issues I've seen where there are these standards placed on women in America, because that's where I am, where in my time period growing up, if you didn't look like Angelina Jolie in Mr. and Mrs. Smith, which is still one of my favorite movies, um, or somebody who was running on America's Next Top Model, or you don't look like somebody who would be hired to work a runway or model a swimsuit, or Megan Fox, like you just, you weren't as valuable for some reason. You weren't as desirable. You weren't as wanted. And obviously, every part of that is completely untrue. And I want to get that across right now. It's not true. But the way that I was raised conditioned me to hold those beliefs for over 2 decades. And that's what I want to talk about today. Because that wasn't only like really painful for me, and like now it's embarrassing actually to admit that out loud and say it to all these people like you that I haven't even met before. It's like I'm actually embarrassed that I thought that way about myself for so long, but it pains me to know that there are probably other people out there who feel this way about themselves and that have been taught that it's okay to feel this way about yourself, because it's really not. And if you are, I don't want you to beat yourself up over it and go like, oh my god, like, like not only do I not feel good about myself, but now I'm a jerk because I've been beating myself up for so long, because it's not your fault. You're doing the best with your situation, your circumstances, your knowledge at the time, and your capacity to do and handle whatever it is you're doing and handling, because life can be so hard in so many different ways. It's multifaceted struggles out here. But if there's anybody else that gets anything from this video, then I'm happy I cried in front of a camera today as a grown ass adult. Okay, so we'll move on, but like that's kind of where I'm coming from. And so when I started thinking about, oh my god, like I'm actually associating my worth as a human being with what I look like, and specifically for this discussion, since we're using me as an example, it's my weight, but it's more about like my body fat percentage. That's specifically what I've had the most harm with and the most negative associations conditioned into me for. And I know everybody's different, so take this how you will, but it doesn't just have to be about body fat percentage if you were conditioned to think negatively about something else about you. To whatever degree you could influence or not influence that. This is just, this is the only example I really have the capacity to give you in a way that's going to be deep enough to be accurate and hopefully helpful. Okay, so I wanted to start out with why this came about and why I ended up realizing I feel this way. And it started when I was a child, very young, and it continued until I finally moved out of the house when I was 17. And I still had influences that weren't necessarily helpful for my healing after that in my years where I did do an undergraduate at college and moved around a little bit after that. So the most offensive and damaging statements that other people have made towards me are going to be talked about now. And I hope that nobody takes any of these to heart, because they are blatantly untrue, but young impressionable minds can absorb and be impacted by these things like I was. So to get not lost in the weeds, I do have some notes. And I remember like a lot of these comments were made by people in my own family. So my mother, my aunts, to some degree, my grandparents, um, and my stepmother for sure was not helpful. But I don't want to have this become a mini hate campaign against these important people in my life. I believe that they did the best they could with the situations that they were given in the way that they had. The traumatic part, though, is regardless of their intentions in each of these situations, these were all people that were struggling with similar issues about how they viewed themselves physically and conflating that to their self worth, which is very damaging and I'm advocating against in this video. The problem is, a lot of times adults are children that got old, and then parents are just old children that ended up having kids. A lot of them have baggage that they have not dealt with, and it's very easily inherited to the younger generations. And in my family's case, it went from grandparents to my mother and my aunts, and eventually to me and my cousins. So, I'm going to be saying a lot of things that paint my mother and my aunts in a negative light, but you're only seeing a very small snapshot, one side of them. So ever since I was young, as young as I can remember, like 3 or something, I can remember my mother making negative comments about her body. She wasn't as thin as she liked to be. She claims in high school she was about a pant size 2. Not that that matters, but to give you a tangible frame of reference. A pant size 2 is very small for people who don't care about how women's pants work. It's close to what some people in the modeling industry and fashion industry do wear. A lot of times they can also wear 0 and 00, but to give you a frame of reference, it is very slender. Now, um, when I was growing up, she was nowhere near a pant size 2. She was much closer to probably a 14 or a 16. And for her, that large of a difference was upsetting because she had traumas associated with body weight that was conditioned into her that she has not dealt with at that time. And that was then inherited to me. Ever since I was young, there were negative comments she would make about her that myself and my sister, who's 2 years older than me, would hear regularly. I'm talking multiple times a week, if not daily, about she didn't like her body size. She wasn't pleased with how large her legs were. She didn't enjoy the visual cellulite. She didn't like not being able to fit into smaller pant sizes because the number of the tag in her pants had an impact on how she viewed herself, which is so wrong on so many levels. And I hope everyone out there doesn't have that same negative association. And if you do, I wish you all the best in your journey. Now, there were multiple instances of her calling herself a beached whale, which is obviously damaging to hear as children. She and my aunts would also judge other people. So if we were in public, like at a mall or a park or whatever, they would, point to strangers and go like, "Oh, look at them! Like they're pretty huge. Like they're fat." And now, obviously, none of that has to do with self worth. None of that is how well balanced people make impressions of other human beings. Truly loving individuals will not look at you, and the first thing they see will not be your size. They will not look at you and say, "You're too skinny, you're too fat, you're this, you're that." They will look at you and talk to you and get to know you and figure something out based off of that. First impressions are a thing we can't avoid. As humans, we are observant creatures, always trying to gather information. Thank you, mammalian brains. But we will not value your worth as loving individuals by your physical characteristics. Other people who are not in a place of love may operate differently, like my mother does. And a lot of what happened with my mom and my aunts judging people and strangers like that is they're so hyper focused on evaluating themselves and fixating on their physical characteristics that when they look at somebody else, that's all they can see for the longest time. So that's why they do that. I don't think that as a child it's helpful to hear that because, and a lot of why I'm reiterating this point now is because it puts a paranoia into your head that if you're already fighting self-conscious feelings about yourself, you start to worry that's what other people see and that's all they see you for. And so I just want to tell you, if somebody is doing that to you, it's because of their own issues, and you don't need that person to take up space in your life. And you, oh, excuse me, and you don't have to value anything they're saying or how they evaluate you. That's a dead giveaway that you don't need to put up with their shit. Okay. But as a child, this is what I was hearing all the time. And so it put those worries into my head. And it's really hard sometimes to not have those worries when all you hear all the time is, this is how we judge people first, and then we talk about other parts of them later.
Editing me is stepping in to mute my old self right now because this comment was wildly offensive and disparaging to multiple communities, not just women. And I don't think that that needs to be perpetuated on the internet, even if none of us believe in it. So, what I want to say is that my mother made disparaging comments related to her breasts and that she didn't like their size and or shape, and she would loudly complain about this multiple times a day uh, for weeks. And she just so happened to start loudly complaining about it right when I was in the phase of my life where I was going to start needing bras, and she got louder and more insistent about how it wasn't something to feel good about, like right before we went bra shopping for the first time. And it didn't make me feel good. It made me feel really, really self conscious, really, really bad about myself. Whenever we needed to go like get bras or get new sizes of them. And I'm not taking this part out because it's important to remember for the trends that start to come up with what my mother decides to complain about.
That comment had a lot of impacts, and I bring it up because it's a good example to show you what I was raised around and what I was exposed to, and the lines of thinking that were constantly told to me and went in one ear and not fully out the other, because young impressionable minds are just that. They're young and impressionable. They're trying to learn from the adults that they trust to raise them appropriately and depend on them. And I got all of these conflicting opinions about what men should look like, what women should look like, what's okay to do, what's not okay to do as far as appearance and fashion and all this stuff. And it's so hurtful. And it took me so long to move past. And so I really, really hope that everybody here feels safe and accepted, because her comment has absolutely nothing to do with how myself, my husband, and people in this space and on this channel feel about you or anybody close to you. Okay. So we're gonna move on, but that's a really powerful example to show you like just how discriminatory of opinions and viewpoints I was raised by, because of other adults like damaged viewpoints of themselves and their lack of self-love. So we're done with that like horrible note paper. We're not gonna revisit that. Okay. I also grew up in the era of um, it was bad to be a girl because you're not good at doing stuff and you're physically unable. So, for example, you do this like a girl, you throw like a girl, you tackle like a girl, you play sports like a girl. I was growing up when all of that was prevalent. Um, I hope it's less prevalent for girls now. But that couldn't help when that is thought of in conjunction with my family. And I bring this up because our environments are so complex that maybe the things around you are what's damaging you, and it's not just your family. So I want to bring up how complex these situations can be, and they're usually multifaceted. They're not one thing. And they can be one thing, but I'm trying to be inclusive here. talk to everybody and explain my situation, which was complex. Okay, there's a lot of like negative influences here. I was also growing up, again, I've talked about it once or twice, but when America's Next Top Model was on, my sister would watch it religiously and then freak out because she didn't look like them, and she'd want to dye her hair if like her favorite one on there got their hair dyed or whatever. Like there was a lot of other stuff going on there, but there was this extra push in the media to have everybody look like models, and there was an extra push for everybody to want to be like them when they grew up if you were in my like subset of a generation, because I don't even want to say the whole generation. It was like if you were in like my or my sister's age range at that time, like plus or minus 1 or 2 years, that's what you were exposed to, and that's what was pushed to you. Now, The Biggest Loser also had its heydays while I was younger and impressionable, and so I was around for all of that fat shaming to be shamelessly shown on TV. Like, I remember the producer of the dang show was telling people in like interviews regularly, like, oh, well, when you see him on TV, at least you can point at them and say, like, at least I don't look like that. And like, one, there's so many things wrong with that, and that's not okay. People coming from a place of love will not compare themselves to you on a physical level or otherwise, because that comparison tells you they're trying to derive some kind of worth from it, and they're so insecure that they have to derive worth in a hierarchical standpoint like this, where like if you're a step ahead above someone in some categorical nonsensical way, all of a sudden you can feel a little bit better about yourself, because if you had no one to compare yourself to, you would be baseline and therefore worthless, which is inherently not true. And people coming from a place of love don't think that way. And so this channel will not think that way about you, and we don't host or support people that think that way. But that was the culture that surrounded the family that I grew up in. So I had very few little positive influences when it came to weight and size and how you view yourself physically, where politicians started to have their quote war on obesity. Kind of like earlier in the century, there was the war on drugs that gave the certain politicians lots of traction to then get voted into office. Their new thing was the war on obesity, because politicians love to villainize something to make themselves look like the good guy, and therefore you have a larger cause to vote on, except for just picking one person over another. It's a very like repeated tactic they do. It just conveniently happened that while I was growing up, they decided they were going to very loudly, sometimes do it for health reasons, but very loudly fat shame people along with all of these shows and media. So there was another influence that I would hear going on around me as a teenager that wasn't necessarily helping the rest of my complex situation with similar negative influences. So now there's not isolated events. Everything is compounding, from family to extended family to entertainment and media to commercials to politicians and the government policies. So, I'm not saying everything about certain TV shows or policies or whatever is bad. I'm just telling you the level of negative feedback I was surrounded with while my mind was still developing. I remember there was one year I went hiking with my family. But there was one hike that we went on that was multiple miles, and the women in my family usually put weight in their legs, so waist and below. That's just our body type. All shapes are beautiful, even if yours is different or mine is different, whatever. Not whatever, but I've said it so many times, I'm trying to move on. So even when we're not particularly large, even when women in my family are a little bit more slender, usually their legs, their inner thighs will tend to rub together when they walk or run, regardless, just because of our particular body shape. And I remember this one summer when we were hiking, it was particularly hot, hotter than usual for the area we were in. It was like 100 degrees, and I was wearing shorts that were short enough to where some of my inner thighs were rubbing together. I didn't have anything on under it. I forgot to bring like Gold Bond or other anti-chafing powders, which can be particularly frustrating when you do have legs that rub together and you're walking for multiple miles in the sweaty heat. So, too much information, maybe it's important for the story. Now, my legs started to chafe about 2/3 of the way through the hike, and I was expressively exhausted and upset and annoyed at the fact that I was now in pain as the inside of my thighs started to become massively irritated. And by the end of the hike, I was almost in tears from multiple factors, including the fact that I had been told my entire life up until this point, where I was about 14, if you are large, and large includes having your legs rubbed together, even though in my family you don't have to be particularly large for that. If your legs rub together, then that means you have excess fat in that region, which is not a bad thing, but I was conditioned to think so at that point in time, and I believed it at that point in time. So I was upset because now I'm in pain, and it's because of a physical quality that I was told means you're less valuable as a human being. Being upset when my mother asked me what's wrong, I told her that I wanted to start working on losing weight because I want to be able to walk around in shorts in the summertime without being uncomfortable, without my legs hurting. I think that is a reasonable request. At this point in time, I did not fat shame or anything else. I was very calm, and I was very particular to not even use the words large, fat, whatever, anything else to that degree, what have you. And I remember my aunt, who was next to us at that moment in time, became particularly agitated and triggered, even though I didn't even say like anything along the lines of I'm large adjacent language. And she spun herself around, grabbed me by the shoulders, got like real close in my face, and, told me, Amy, you are not fat. Legitimately angry, like may have burst a blood vessel in her forehead. And that in no way had anything to do with me. That was her being uncomfortable with being large, and she then equated that to if she's large and I'm slightly smaller than her and I'm calling myself large, then that means she has to be like fat too. And it was just like, it was so many levels of self projecting and assuming what I'm thinking and how I'm evaluating her that were inherently non existent and not true. And even if I did think that she fit the qualifications of being identified as fat, it would not take away from her value as a human being. But she thought otherwise. And that is the situation that I grew up in, is the influential adults that were most prevalent in my life, that I trusted to raise me and view the world appropriately, would view themselves negatively based on their body fat percentage, would judge other people and everyone around them at every chance they got based on their physical characteristics, most notably body fat percentage, and they would confront you with denial if you in any way, shape, or form believed they viewed you that way. And that is particularly damaging. And I bring up this example to hopefully be a very powerful explanation of how paranoia and distrust in other people trying to explain to you they don't care, all of that not having an impact. Because what happens when you're met with that level of denial, like I was, is they're viewing you that way. You understand, even as a child who doesn't have a degree in manipulation tactics or how to interact with people or like massive amounts of emotional intelligence, you understand they look at everybody and evaluate them and categorize them based on their size and shape. So they're doing it to you, but they won't tell you they're doing it to you, and they will flat out deny the classification that they give you to try to make you feel more comfortable, which does the opposite. It implants the seed of distrust that them, and very unfortunately in my case, anyone else who tells you you're not fat or you're not large or I don't mind, it doesn't change how I view you. It doesn't change how worthy you are of love or how beautiful you are, how attractive you are. You inherently don't believe them because you don't think that they're going to tell you the truth. And it stems from the people you trusted most in your life when you were young and impressionable couldn't tell you the truth and chose not to. So why would all these other new people you're meeting that you don't trust as much at first, why would they tell you the truth? I just kind of think that's how people are going to operate, and it's sad and it's hurtful and it's damaging and it's makes you not want to talk about it. And when you don't want to talk about it, you don't explore this warped world external view that's imposed on you by other people. You don't understand through experience, hey, there are other people that actually don't think that way. And when it does come up, you think that they're being false with you. And so it's really hard to overcome. And that's part of what made this problem persist for so freaking long in my life. And I really hope that's not the case for everybody else out there. But if it is, you're not alone. You're beautiful anyway. I'm actually telling the truth. And you can move past this in the healthiest way for you when you're ready to. And there are people out there that support you. My stepmother also had an unhealthy relationship with food. I don't know the extents of it. I don't keep in touch with her. I haven't for an incredibly long time now, with good reason, hopefully. You'll see that. And she would mostly manifest this in the ways of food withholding and then giving you too much. And it was very binge and then purge. I don't know what the complexities of her eating disorder was, but from my views as a child, it looked like the older stepdaughter and myself and my sister were not allowed to go eat food whenever we wanted when we were in the house if my father wasn't home, and he started showing up at home less and less, even though unfortunately I was only there to visit him because when he was present and around, he was a wonderful dad. So, what it usually looked like is dad and stepmom would leave. Older stepsister, myself, and my sister weren't allowed to eat any food from the kitchen, snacks from pantries or making meals, etc. To the point where my stepmom would like take inventory of all the food before she would leave, and she would then take inventory of the food again when she got back. And if she noticed there was a difference and the youngest stepdaughter did not take responsibility for eating the food, the rest of us would be punished in different ways. Okay, when my stepmom would come home, which was usually late at night around 7 or 8, she would spend a long time cooking enough food to feed a family of, I shit you not, 12 adult men. And then she would put all of it on the table and tell her, my father, and the stepdaughter, the older one of which was a girl in high school, and three very young children, all less than the age of 12. They needed to eat all of it, to which my dad usually didn't hear her and didn't care, would eat his fill and leave. And then it turned into she would police the table for a while. The older stepdaughter would always refuse to eat anything and go to her room or flat out leave the house. The youngest stepdaughter, her favorite, would eat whatever she wanted and then leave, usually cherry picking the plate with what she felt was acceptable. And then my sister and I had to stay at the table until, quote, all of the food was gone. Now, that is damaging for many reasons that, again, I don't have time to get into. But what it did usually manifest as was my sister and I would spend nights sleeping at the dining room table. It then later turned into only me sleeping at the dining room table because the youngest stepsister thought it was funny when my older stepsister bullied me and called me names and the like. So the youngest stepsister would come downstairs after she finished eating, about 10 or 15 minutes later, and she would loudly tell my stepmom that my sister was going to go play with her, so she was done eating dinner. And then it was only me at the table by myself. So I then developed an unhealthy relationship with food. It's not the same as I felt the need to binge and purge or anything like that. I was too young to I guess, be that complex with it. But it turned into when I was asked to binge, I usually tried to oblige, one, because I didn't want to sleep at a fucking dining room table every other weekend for about 3 nights in a row. But and I know 3 nights is more than a weekend, okay, logistics, but it also turned into when I was a small child, and still now, frankly, I don't like to disappoint people, and I generally try to do my best to uplift everyone around me, be that if they asked me to do them a favor or something else, if it was in my ability to do so, I would say yes, which usually means in the past I have been an overachiever at work, or I have been the proactive one in friend groups to organize things or get things done, what have you. I'm getting better at saying no, okay? But there were moments when I first started getting subjected, that's what I choose to use as wordage, when I started getting subjected to my stepmother at first, I did want to do as she asked because I trusted that the adults in my life were doing their best to take care of me and they had my best interests in heart. Naivety of children. I had it pretty bad. So I would try, and it ended up being I would not eat all day, and then I would try to eat too much and then not feel good, but my stomach got used to holding more and more food. As I tried a couple months in, I started getting resentful, giving up, and would just flat out refuse to go visit my father, seeing as how he showed up less and less anyway. So, how do I put this? When you get used to eating a lot of food like that, eventually your stomach craves more food. And it even if I was eating regularly throughout the day, when I was back home with my mother at dinners especially, I would want more food. There's nothing, I guess, inherently wrong with this as children are growing and yada yada, but I did end up putting on weight, which I carried with me until about freshman year of high school when I decided I wanted to lose weight. I unpack this for multiple reasons, being that I had to overcome like an odd relationship with food, which I don't think was dramatic enough to classify as an eating disorder because I don't want to diminish people who, in fact, have an eating disorder of any kind whatsoever. And if you have one of those, I wish you all the best. Now, what this did entail for me was that when I decided I wanted to lose weight because I was unhappy with the pounds I was seeing in the mirror, and I wasn't necessarily unhappy because I thought myself entirely less beautiful from it. There was a factor of that because my mother, like, was constantly fat shaming, quite frankly, along with the rest of my family. But there was an added dynamic of I saw where the fat came from, and I didn't like that there was something about me that I wasn't happy with that was attributed to this very abusive stepmother in my life. I didn't like seeing that she had some profound effect on me because she shouldn't have that power being who she was. So I decided the healthiest thing for me to do in that point in time was to lose weight. To give you a frame of reference, not that it matters or changes my value as a person, but to give you tangible examples so that you can visualize this and follow along. When I decided I was going to start losing weight, I was about a size 14 or 16 in pants or dresses, which was comparable to my mother. Take what you will with this because some families are okay with it and some aren't. Um, I know we were comparable in size because sometimes when we would go hiking over the summer, she would ask to borrow one of my pairs of cargo pants. Now, when both people are consenting to it and fine, sharing clothes is whatever, but it always bothered me because she was wealthy enough to go buy her own pants, so she didn't need to regularly wear my shit. And I didn't like it because I could feel, even though I was still younger and more naive, I suppose you could say, um, I could feel that she was doing it more for comparable reasons than actually wanting my clothes because she thought they looked nice. It was more of a comparison of if I can fit into her pants, so if I can fit into my teenage daughter's pants, then I'm not, quote, that fat. I don't agree with any of this. I don't agree with the fat shaming. I don't agree with equating body size to value. I will say it again because all of this is so offensive out of context if I don't constantly say it. But that's where she was. So as I began my own miniature weight loss journey, to erase what was left of my lingering stepmom's effects from my life and become a healthier individual, mentally and otherwise. I took some very health conscious and potentially extreme measures, like regulating what I eat by measuring it to make sure I understand if I'm getting X amount of servings rather than eyeballing it. I also cut out uh, processed sugars to the best of my degree, and I refused to eat school lunches unless I brought something because I had no idea what the frick they were putting in some of the slop that came on the trays. I also started exercising. I began lifting weights my freshman year of high school, which I absolutely love. I find it very therapeutic. So I grew a lot as an individual by starting my own weight loss journey. I was thinking about calling it temporary, but we're not going to go there. Now, my mother got reasonably, I say reasonably, but I should be saying predictably. My mother became predictably upset when I lost weight and she could no longer directly compare herself to me and see an equals sign next to our pants size numbers because to her, the number in the frickin' tag in the back that nobody sees or cares about when they are healthy and in a good state of being and they don't compare their body size to your value, which please, you deserve more. If you think that way at all, you are worth more than your pants size. She was upset about it. And her way of dealing with it wasn't to be happy for her child or anything of the sort. Her reaction was to very loudly accuse me in front of my sister at home, especially during meals, of being anorexic. And not only do I find that wildly appropriate because it devalues the condition itself and it devalues people who are or have been struggling with such a dangerous and at times life-threatening disorder. It also devalues myself and my own weight loss journey. And at the time, I didn't see that she was attacking me for doing something that she hasn't brought herself to do. So she was attacking me for decreasing my body fat percentage, which is something she was envious of and did not have a means in her mind of achieving the same thing. And therefore, because she could not raise herself to my level, she instead tried to bring me down, which is obviously not an act from a place of love. At the time, I was about 14. I was still learning what it means to be a woman and becoming comfortable with the fact that my body was still changing. I was still growing taller, all this other stuff. Conveniently, all of my friends that I was close with in high school were incredibly athletic, and therefore my problem was wildly unrelatable to them. Especially when you add in the consideration I mentioned earlier of there was this seated paranoia or suspicion that anybody who denied my body fat percentage had anything to do with how they valued me as a person or how they saw me was inherently being false to save my feelings or otherwise, because of how my family reacted when you agreed with them on their judgments and applied it to yourself. So there was a lot of layers going on here, and that one was wildly unhelpful. Now, my mother didn't only single myself out, she also got upset with my sister. So she lost enough weight to where my mom could no longer reasonably compare herself to my sister and also became outwardly upset and loudly accused my sister, just like she did to me in front of us, normally attacking us during meal times, probably to try to get us to eat more. To prove her accusations wrong, she tried to goad us into eating more now that I think about it, probably, but she also accused my sister of being of being anorexic. But she did. And that's what I grew up with is if you're comparable to her, then you're worth less as a human being. But if you are not comparable to her, she will attack you. And it was very damaging. And I remember as I started to bulk up somewhat. I wasn't bodybuilder level, but again, like I mentioned earlier, when I flexed, you could see it. When I wrote in class, you could like see the back muscles on my right side moving as I moved my arm if I was wearing a tighter fit shirt. So there was something there, and I remember instead of being met with applause or support, at most I was met with neutrality because all of my friends were athletics, so having something there was normal, and none of them felt a need to comment, which is in a way appropriate. Like that's sort of the healthiest thing to do, is say, hey, I don't care that your body shape changed or your outward appearance changed. You're still my friend, and I love you for you and whatever way you are. Like, that's fine. But for me, it was just a missed opportunity to have a apparent positive feedback. And so tragically for me, not that any of this is my friend's fault. You're not obligated to compliment people, period. But for me, I was met with only negativity somehow again. So as I began getting more fit, I remember this is how clear this memory was to me because of how much of a personal attack it happened to be. Um, and like how just aggressive the community I grew up in was. But I remember one time I went to a restaurant with my family. It was my mom, my sister, and I. And there was another woman there who was probably a runner, if not doing like, some other kind of hit training or endurance. And she was very toned, and she had those like calf muscles that you can see when she walks, they like flex and move. And her table got called up with her family before ours. And as she walked past us and walked away following the waiter, my mother had to very loudly comment that she thinks it's absolutely disgusting when you can see a woman's calf muscles because they are, quote, gross. And of course, she never had that opinion until after I started lifting weights. And to add to how I understand this is a personal attack to try to make me feel bad and pull me down, my mother in high school and college lifted weights religiously with my father. He got her into it, and she was very very muscular at the time, to where her shoulders were like large and bulky, and she had to wear like a different size shirt from it. And I've seen pictures of her in the past where she does have muscle tone everywhere, including her legs. So she either thought she was disgusting as well in the past, quote unquote, which I disagree with entirely, or she was again trying to make me feel bad because she only talks highly about herself when she remembers when she used to lift weights. Sometimes there's no pleasing people. And you don't have to hold anything about those people at weight. You can outright reject them. It is your life, and I wish you do if you need to save your own sanity and mental, emotional, spiritual well-being. But my grandma did make some pretty horrible comments towards me, equating value and worth of women to their subjective beauty, and that subjective beauty having the stipulations of, if you have anything that is reportedly masculine, then you are less beautiful as a woman and therefore you are less valuable. Now, this is double-sided because we also see from men that there are standards with this line of thinking that if you are not very muscled, that you are inherently less objective or subjectively attractive as a male, and therefore you have less worth. Both of which are wrong, and for any male who has managed to listen to a girl talk about her body for this long, I hope that this is helping, and I hope that you are not also damaged by these double standards. And if you are, or you know someone who is, I hope that they are growing from it in all the ways that suit them best. Aside from all of this, I was met with double standards when I got second jobs. That should have been another wake up call to me that when you are met with negativity on both sides, neither negativity matters. They nullify themselves to a certain degree, not always. But if people tell you they, in their own opinion, don't approve of your appearance when you are one way and another way, then it no longer means anything, right? And it shouldn't mean anything if they tell you it even one way. It should tell you that they as a person don't need to matter to you and don't need to take up space in your life, and they don't need to live rent free in your room for being a jerk and saying their opinions mean something to you when they don't have to, because that's your choice and you are beautiful. For me, it didn't occur that way. However, I refused to stop lifting weights and look, quote, less masculine, which I don't think muscles inherently mean you are more masculine or more feminine. That is completely a socially constructed opinion. Okay, so for me in my damaged brain, as we are unpacking this, and by damaged brain, I mean conditioned to think about my body in an unhealthy light, what it simply meant was, once again, people don't approve of my physical appearance outside of my high school friends, and everybody is judging how I look and therefore placing worth and value on myself as a human being. And now there's the added layer of my functionality, because when I was large, nobody had anything to say or assess about my physical fitness. That was most likely because they all just assumed my physical fitness was less than theirs, or at a level where they didn't feel the need to see if they were comparable to me or better. Whereas now, as a particularly fit young woman that was visibly more muscled than some other people, it probably made them feel insecure in some way and challenged or threatened or offended their own ideals of what a woman should be and what a man should be. So there was, in my mind, the only pushback change that I got from the people I was surrounded by was that now not only was my appearance unsatisfactory and negatively impacted my value as a human to them, but now my fitness was also in question and a new moving piece in whether or not I was valuable as a human being.
Hi everyone, editor me again here. So this next part, I just wanted to speed up and cut out some of the details since this video is so long. But basically what happened is after I moved away from my parents' home, my mother's home, and I went to college, I was introduced to a new, quite large group of people who had positive things to say about my physical appearance for once, and it instilled what I'm calling like a false sense of confidence in me, because it was really nice to hear and get positive feedback and compliments. The issue I faced with it though was that if I ever was going to stop getting those compliments, I fully believe that my confidence would go back down because I was getting validation from external lenses, viewpoints, and opinions rather than relying on my own self confidence. Like, my what I thought was my self confidence was based purely on if I was getting positive feedback from people around me. So it was a positive change to feel good about myself, uh, or feel good about my physical appearance for the first time in a very long time since I was a young child. But it was sad to see that leave me as I got too busy during my graduate studies, to have a healthy work life balance and eventually give up my weightlifting regimen, and I saw myself gain weight again. So now we're at present day where we're coming full circle with this video, and I'm starting to think about I really did like lifting weights and I really enjoyed the way that I looked, and the way that I felt. but I'm not staying motivated. So, what's going on there? Like, what part of me is interested enough in this, values my physical appearance enough to where I want to lose weight, but doesn't value it enough to follow through? So, now we're going to talk about what my realizations were and how I actually decided I'm going to define beauty from here on out, to put all of these damaging perspectives that I've talked about here in the past and just let go of them and finally feel good about who I am and how I look. Um, and I'm hoping that given the information here, this next portion of the discussion where we talk about how beauty can actually be defined and how I'm advocating it's defined is much more impactful and hopefully relatable to those of you who are here with me talking about this.
The issue was I wanted to get back to where I was when I was more muscular, had less body fat percentage, was more toned, all that, more in shape, if you will. And I kept failing this whole year. Like it was my New Year's resolution, and I kept trying every now and then, and I just drop it, and then like multiple weeks later, I'd realize, oh, I stopped the diet, I stopped the exercise routine, I stopped the wellness plan that I had for myself. Oops, like what happened? Why didn't I notice earlier? And that's what all of this comes back to. Is I'm at this point where I want to lose weight, and I started asking myself, why do I want to get back to where I was? Why is that important for me? And how is it important enough for me to feel like I should be doing it and then just like not follow through and not care? Because if it was really, really valuable, I think I would care more. I would notice sooner, or I would not stop doing these things, these plans I set in motion in the first place. And I ultimately realized that some of my intentions were right, but the ones I was placing importance on weren't. So I very sadly was in a position this entire past year to where I felt I should lose weight and that I would feel more comfortable after I do, because then I would be more like all of these subjective descriptions of beauty I grew up with. And I realized that the conditioning I had received for 2 decades, just about, I never healed from, even though there were opportunities where I could, and I got positive feedback and influences in the other direction, and was surrounded by wonderful friends who could have just told me this outright, but I may or may not have believed them based on this, like, layer of I've seen everybody deny to people's faces saying, hey, like you're not as big as you think you are, you're fine, instead of just saying like, one, it doesn't matter, you're beautiful, and like, you know, two, it just why would you care? Why should you care? And like, why should you care what anyone else sees you as? But there was all this paranoia of if they say that stuff, they're not being truthful, and it's inherently not how things go. All of that is not true, which I've said so many times in this video, and I hope that you already knew it. And if you didn't, I hope this helps in some way, and that this is part of your journey and growth as a wonderful human being and the beautiful person that you are. I do want to say that when I was reflecting on this yesterday, um, not only did I come to the realization that I had been subconsciously relating my self worth to my body fat percentage, but I also realized something else. I realized that there was a part of me that, regardless of self worth, I did want my muscles back, and I wanted to unpack that. And a lot of this discussion is about actually defining what beauty is. I had an inherent conundrum with the thinking of, if I am valuable, regardless of what my outward appearance is. And if my value does not change based on any change to my outward appearance, which I do believe, then what's the value in changing my outward appearance? Like why should I care if I want a haircut or if I want to change the color or if I want a tattoo or if I want like more, can you see that? If I want more piercings, and like why should I care if I want to get my muscles back, or if I want to change my fashion, or what color I made my nails. Like, how could any of that matter to me if I don't have an inherent value placed on my outward appearance? So my biggest question was if I'm the same amount of value I as when I am the way I am now, and when I am more muscular down the line, or as I was in my past, what's the motivation for me to change my outward appearance? What's the motivation to exercise at all outside of fitness's sake? And I say outside of fitness's sake because being fit is important, okay? That's self love, that's self care. But as I am right now, I'm not inherently unfit. It's like the fitness level I'm at is a fitness level where I'm not at risk of certain diseases or disorders that could be fixed by increasing my fitness level, is what I'm trying to say. Um, and so I'm at a point where I'm like, what's the inherent value? I, in my logical mind, which is not always the best way to approach things, but I, in my logical mind, cannot see a reason to motivate myself to exercise, even though I may say that I want to. And that was part of my struggle. And I think that's part of why I've been failing this year, because the reasons I told myself I knew in my heart of hearts weren't true. I didn't agree with, I didn't care, because I was conditioned to think that way, and I held on to those thought patterns subconsciously, but it held no inherent value for me. So when I really thought about it yesterday, they just fell away. You know, they had no substance. They didn't mean anything. They had zero value because I, at my core, don't agree with people's worth being placed on their physical characteristics of any kind. And I'm proud of that line of thinking. Um, so I had this extra conundrum of why even bother? Just, I'm fit enough. I don't need to. Why bother? So then I had this question of why do I still feel like I want to? And maybe it's as simple as I just want to. And when I started thinking about why else, I kind of thought of this thing that I'm not really entirely sure how other people have covered, and that might be my fault for being too rash making this video and not doing the research. But I think there's a very real want, at least for me and people I'm surrounded by, so hopefully there's more out there, hello, of the want to be attractive to your partner or partners or future partners. Anything from something casual to a lifelong journey with them, and however many you choose. We are an accepting community. As long as all these, partnerships and relationships are mutual, then we're accepting of it. And I think there's this really big desire for a lot of people to want to be attractive to and for their partners. And if you don't mind your outward appearance changing, if there's no inherent value of that change, is there still value we would place on it for the sake of being attractive? And I know that's been labeled superficial a lot, of like, I only want to work out so that I look good, you know? Um, but if you want to look good because you want to look good and you think looking good is being fit, then like that's empowering for you and that should be supported. I think the inherent problems in that some people have been not eloquent in communicating is when you decide you're going to look good for reasons that aren't empowering to you. Like if you have a partner who, you know, has abusive tendencies and they tell you like, oh well, I don't want to be seen in public with you because you don't look this way and working out would fix it, so like go do that, then that's not coming from a place of love. That's not empowering to you, and in those cases you shouldn't feel the need or the want to look good just to look good by someone else's standards. I hope that that makes sense. So I had this very real concern of, do I simply want to work out again because I believe that makes me more attractive to my partner and that I want to be attractive for my partner? Um, and I just wonder how many other people out there really struggle with that as well. So, on the assumption that there are people out there that struggle that way, that are going to watch this, I wanted to unpack that as I kind of define like what beauty is. And so at this point, I really thought like, okay, well, first I need to take another step back and I need to figure out what is beautiful. Because if beauty is as superficial and as simple as like, if you're fit, like if you're a man you have large muscles, and if you're a woman you're fit but you're not like ripped, then like yeah, you're beautiful, it's fine, because that's what like American media has told us for so long now, like longer than I've been here. That's for sure. But I don't think that's inherently true. I reject that outright. And I think that is a preference of certain people for sure. And if that's how partly you define beauty, like that's, or not define beauty, let me take a step back so we don't get misconstrued here. If that's part of what you think is attractive, you should not be shamed for that. However, there should be no discrimination against people that don't meet criteria you believe to be attractive, because unattractive people to you are just as beautiful and are going to be attractive to other people, and they are not any less valid, and that is fine. Okay, what I came up with here, besides all of the other examples, that the construction of what society, not individuals, I'm talking media, tells you is attractive here in America today is so different from what it has been in the past and before and this and that, that you can see very clearly it's a socially constructed opinion. And I'm calling it an opinion because it is one. Um, I don't think you should call it a truth or conflate it with that word, and anybody who does should be challenged in whatever way is appropriate and coming from a place of love. So, for example, like 300, 400 years ago, it was actually really attractive to be obese, because that meant you had the means to eat enough food to get to that point, and only very privileged individuals could do that. Now you're really attractive through the other way, because privileged individuals can dump more money than somebody will make in 10 years of work to make sure that they look like they haven't aged a day, even though they're like 60 years old. So that's where we are. Um, and that's very crude, and when you nitpick it, it's very not true. But for the sake of not turning this into an entire PhD dissertation, I'm leaving the examples at that. So, individually, we're all going to have different definitions of what is attractive, and if you want to challenge me on that, go ask all of your friends what their favorite hair color on the sex they're attracted to is, because everybody has opinions on blondes, brunettes, redheads, if they like dark skin, if they like light skin, if they like freckles, if they like dyed hair, if they like tattoos. Everyone has like opinions and preferences, and that should be celebrated. That shouldn't be shamed. And I don't think it should be fought against, that everyone has to have the same ideals. If they overlap, cool. If they don't, like, cool. But I don't think it needs to go further than that, because then somebody's getting shamed for something they don't need to have negative repercussions to. Okay. That's my 2 cents on the matter anyway. Hopefully that's not too preachy. So, given that internal discussion I had with myself, I came to the conclusion that, like, yes, I do want to look attractive. It won't change my worth as a human being necessarily. Like, I won't devalue myself for it, but I'll be a lot happier if I, have someone that I'm really happy being with and they're attracted to me. Like, if I'm interested in starting a relationship with them, I'm going to be happier if they're attracted to me than if they're not. Um, and I didn't, but like something didn't sit right with me thinking the only reason I would want to change my physical appearance is just to please somebody else, just to be attracted to somebody else. Like, that doesn't sound fulfilling. That sounds like trying to serve somebody else using like means I have in my life to do it in a way that's very intrusive. It's kind of stepping a boundary that isn't just I have time to do like a quick favor for somebody, that's dedicating a lot of time and resources and like changing your physical appearance, which you have to deal with more than anybody else in your life, because you have to live with yourself constantly. Nobody else does. So I kind of just thought about like, what is beauty if nobody has to have the same definitions? And part of being beautiful is, you know, potentially being attractive. And because like if I'm attractive, if I define myself as beautiful, I would think I would be attractive um, to other people that I'm interested in. Um, I wouldn't call myself necessarily like beautiful, but attractive to exactly nobody. Like there's gonna be somebody out there, and I think that's even true for people who define themselves as objectively like not beautiful. Is someone out there will be attracted to you, and that juxtaposition kind of led me to the realization that I'll share with you in a second. What I ultimately concluded with myself is that you are beautiful regardless. Now, that beauty stems from who you are genuinely, what's in here. When you live a life that is the most in line with your true self, your most authentic self, you will be at your most beautiful. And the reverse is true. The more you mask yourself, the more you comply with behaviors, lifestyles, and other things that aren't in line with your true self, the less beautiful you will make yourself. And I really like this definition because it applies to everybody. It's anyone in any situation at any point in time, regardless of all factors being applied to or not applied to them. And it can be different. It will manifest differently and look differently to everybody out there. And that's what's so amazing about being beautiful. If you haven't figured out this is a spiritual channel yet, hello, now you know. Um, so to cover the worry about being attractive, when you are acting with what is in line with your truest self, you will be attractive to the people that are meant to be in your life. You will be attractive to your kindred spirits, to your twin flames, to your soulmates, and those can manifest as best friends, family members, lifelong partners, serious intimate relationships, all of it. So, I wanted to talk about what happens when we are our truest selves, or we're doing the best we can with the means we have to be our truest selves. Because, in a way, it will define your physical appearance. Some people feel really fulfilled when they, excuse me, some people will feel really fulfilled when they exercise. Some people will feel really fulfilled when they get a new tattoo, when they get a new face piercing, when they get work done to make it look like they're not aging. And yes, like we talked about how that can be very superficial and not coming from a place of love, but when you're doing it for yourself, it will hit different. It will feel so much better than when you're doing it from a place of negativity, fear, conditioning, all of that. And I think you'll know, just like I knew, when you challenge certain feelings, beliefs, or values and you can't support them and they just fall away. Those are the parts of you that aren't meant to be there, and they're no longer part of your identity. They're not part of your true self. So for me personally, I have come to the conclusion that I still want to get back in shape. That's what I'm going to work on next year. But I'm going to do it from a place of love instead of a place of worry and fear. And I'm doing it because I want to. I think lifting weights is fun. And I can't tell you why other than it is. And I think that's one of the core, most like slipperiest, hard to explain parts of when you're doing something in line with yourself and is inherently you, is you can't tell somebody why it just is. I think some of the best examples of this can be when you ask children, what do you want to be when you grow up? And they tell you an astronaut, a cowboy, a pirate, the president, a doctor, a hairstylist, whatever it is. They'll always kind of come back to, it's really cool. I think it's fun. It's so neat. I just want to. Those are all things that kind of signal to you there is a deeper drive that is a part of you that you can't explain, but it's there, and there's no amount of external changes that are going to change it because it's a part of who you are at your deepest, at your truest. And that's what makes it beautiful. So, for example, when you ask someone, what's your favorite color or what's your favorite food, they'll give you an answer. They always have, like, well, I really like this or I really like that. But when you keep asking them why, right, eventually it just gets down to, I don't know, I just do. So they might start off with an answer like, what's your favorite food? Oh, well, it's like curry because it's spicy and I don't like bland foods. Well, why? And then, well, I like this spice better than that one. And then, okay, well, but like, why? And if you keep asking why, eventually they say, I don't know, I just like it. I just do. It's just my favorite. It's just a part of me. And that justification on the understanding that it's there and it's a part of you, it's part of like what drives you or you're attracted to, but there's nothing behind that that we can see as human beings. That's when you know that's part of you. And so for me, I'm lifting weights again, or I'm going to start again for real, not because I think it'll add worth as a human being or I'm worried about how beautiful the rest of the world sees me. I'm doing it because like it fulfills me, and when I view myself, I feel more fulfilled if I view myself as a weightlifter than if I don't. And that has nothing to do with because people like me better when I do that or I have less body fat. It has to do with, for me, even if no one was around, no one was to tell me different, everybody said boo or yay, that's still something I would be motivated to do and I would feel fulfilled doing. And that's very, very different than feeling like I need to because the world wants me to. So that's where we are. And I wanted to explain really quickly, just clarify, almost nothing as far as like my family or the people that surrounded me when I grew up and conditioned me has changed. And I want to bring that up because I want to make it clear that I made this change and realization. Um, Moving far away probably helped to give me the space I needed to think about this for a period of time, but because healthier environments can always help with that. Um, But I wanted to point that out because you don't need your environment to change to grow as an individual. It's helpful, but you don't need it. And as you grow as an individual, you will see your environment change and the people that are attracted to you change. And I want to give a couple examples, I suppose, to wrap this up, where the more you mask yourself, the harder it'll be for your true soulmates, kindred spirits, people that resonate at the same level as you, that like the same things as you, that will encourage you to be your best self and come from a place of genuine love. Those people will have a harder time finding you and understanding that's who you are if you're not living as your truest self, if you're doing things to kind of like purposely mask yourself to fit in to avoid external scrutiny. And everyone's situation is different. As long as you're doing the best you can, it'll work out. I think. Um, but for example, let's say you're somebody that let's say you're somebody that's really interested in what's a good example here. I wanted to use something less superficial than just outward appearance. So let's say you're somebody who's really interested in meditation, and you believe that like singing bowls and crystals are really helpful for that. So you have like a really large crystal collection, and you believe certain ones have helpful frequencies and resonance and energies that help with certain things, and you're really interested in it, and that's like a big part of who you are when you're home in your own space by yourself. Now, when you go out and you present yourself to the world, you are who you are, but you never talk about meditating. You never talk about your crystals. When friends come over, all that stuff is hidden in your bedroom. No one knows. It's going to be very hard to find other people who are interested in that if you're not willing to show the world that you are interested in that. And there's a good chance, like, maybe you already know people who are into it, but because you're not open about it and you don't talk about it, and it's at the point where, you're kind of hiding it away, that you're missing those opportunities. Whereas, like let's say when you meet new people or you're introduced to new friends outside of work and whatever, um, that when they say, "Oh, what are you interested in? Like, what are your hobbies? What do you spend your time doing?" You talk about everything except for that. Like, there's a chance that if you talked about it, someone might say, like, "Oh, I'm curious about that. It'd be really cool if we could talk about it more." They'd say, "Oh, hey, like me too." But maybe you're missing out on those opportunities. Excuse me. Maybe you're missing out on those opportunities just because you're not being super forward. So like a more superficial example, I guess, would be um, if you're really into all of the classic things that are associated with being goth. So you really like the dyed hair with the edgy hairdos of mohawks, or like all the hairspray and like the like red tips, and you like the trip pants, and you like the combat boots with the trip pants, and you love when you can hear all the chains like flying around everywhere, and you love the band t-shirts and the face piercings and the gauges in the ears and the tattoos, and maybe you even like do the black eyeliner, like you just go all out, like the black nails, and you listen to like some pretty hard music. Like sometimes it's screamo, and sometimes it's death metal, and sometimes maybe it's not that hard. But you love all of those things. Like that kind of aesthetic, that fashion, that type of culture is like your thing. But growing up, you never had like resources or the friends that were into it, so you didn't develop any of that. And then as you got older, you decided like society accepts me fine when I dress normal, for whatever you think that is, or whatever society like tells you that is. And so let's say you just you do like just like jeans and some shirt, or you do the basketball athletic shorts with like an oversized tee, and that's what you present yourself to the world as, you're going to attract other people who are outwardly adopting that goth aesthetic. You're going to attract less of those if you dress very casually than if you also just adopted that aesthetic that in this example you love so much. Um, I'm not saying you'll never attract them, and you can certainly find them and approach them and bond with them, but the bonds would happen faster and be stronger, and they would happen more often if you also presented yourself in this aesthetic that you love so much. So I really hope that even those examples were incredibly crude, they help describe the point a little more outside of a perspective that's like just my own. So I hope you have just an absolute wonderful day, and I'll see you in a brand new video.